We are live. So today, first off, I am Brent Schooley. I am a developer evangelist at Twilio. And one of the things that I love doing is building iOS applications, and I really love Swift. So today I wanted to walk through a little bit of the basics of how iOS programming works, what some of the popular package managers are, how they work. And if we have time, I'm a little short on time today. Actually, I have an inspector coming to walk through the apartment today because there's some construction downstairs, so they want to come through and check everything out. But suffice to say, I'm going to have to check out when they show up. But in the meantime, we'll work through some applications. So what is Twilio, you might be asking since it's on the screen. Twilio is a developer platform that allows you to connect the people that you care about using the tools and technologies that you already know in the apps that you're already building. And one of the great things that we have for you this year in particular is a strong mobile focus. So we've just released some chat APIs and some APIs for cross-platform video. And they're great, they're a lot of fun to work with, and we're excited to show them to you. And I know for a fact I'm super excited about these products. It's great to have so many tools for mobile developers in our toolbox now, and happy to show them to you. But I thought we'd get started today with just some simple basics of iOS programming in Swift. And like all things in the Apple world, that actually happens in Xcode. I'm going to launch a fresh launch of Xcode here so you can see what it looks like when you get started. And I'm going to wait just a minute to check on the stream quality, make sure everything's working out good. I'm going to be hanging out for a little bit. I'll actually start programming at 9:30 as scheduled. If anybody has any questions at any point in time, feel free to interact with me in the chat. That chat will be available to people that are watching the stream later. As you can see, it's available on screen, so don't feel like your questions are going to get lost. I will see them, so feel free to ask them at any time. I'll slow down if need to, go back and cover anything. At any time that you forget what I'm working on or might be curious about what I might be working on, you can type bang project, so exclamation point project, into the chat, and you'll get a nice summary from my buddy Nightbot that will show you exactly what I'm working on. As you can see, I'm going to be doing the basics of programming with Swift, and then we'll quickly move on to show how you can create chat apps really quickly, starting from the quick start, the Twilio quick start, and then we might add some features. Time permitting, we're going to have pretty short on time. Oh, it looks like Phil's joined us. Hey there. How's it going, Phil? Good to see Phil. Phil's one of my colleagues at Twilio. He's done some streaming too. Phil's great people. So if you have any questions, you can also ping Phil if he's here. Although I don't know if Phil will be around. Phil's in the UK. But I had Phil come in to check to see how things were going. How's everything looking, Phil? Awesome. Everything looks sharp. Text sizes. Let's see. I'll open a project. Let's see. Just do a new project. Walk through creating a single view application. Name it Hey Phil. Oh, that's right. We have a meeting later, so Phil will be around. I'll just create it in projects. Let me know how text is looking on the screen. I'm gonna go hop into the storyboard file. This is where things get a little wonky because the screen real estate that I have on this screen resolution is not fantastic, but we'll make it work. Just hide a few things that we don't necessarily need. Zoom back around, and then just one quick check. This is what I really care about, is how does this look when I pop this label out here and go into Assistant Editor. How does the text look? Are you able to see this fairly crisply when I create this hello label? we'll wait before going on. But I think everything looks good. I've got a one-to-one preview in my setup, so I think everything is good, and that's great. So we'll use this. We won't use the Hey Phil project. I like Phil a lot, but we probably shouldn't be naming projects Hey Phil. Yeah, the Xcode UI is always going to be a bit small. Unfortunately, they don't allow you to tweak the fonts in that. That would be a pretty system level kind of thing. But yeah, and I think it would kind of blow up the entire screen. So yeah, not a whole lot we can do with that. So let's create a project that's not named Hey Phil. Let's create a single view application. So one thing that you'll start out with when you're doing iOS programming, you're going to start off with a project template. And there's a bunch of different project templates. They correspond to a lot of different types of apps that you might build and a lot of apps that you might have seen as you've been using iOS applications. So you have a master detail application. So this is one of those applications where you're navigating through screens. So you'll have a list of objects and you'll tap one and it'll move you into the next page. On the iPad, the list will be on the left and the content will be over on the right. It's great for creating exactly what it says, master detail application. A page-based application. So this is not super commonly used, but you might have seen this. The weather application is the classic weather application on iOS is an example of this, where there's multiple pages that you can swipe through in the UI, and you're given a controller that allows you to swipe through those different pages. A single view application, this is where we're going to start. This is the most basic, most empty project you can have. It just gives you a single page that launches. And oftentimes I'll start with the single page application and get rid of that single page and replace it with something. But this is sort of your basic template. And then tabbed application gives you a tab bar. You've seen the tabs at the bottom in iOS applications. And then game, this is your starting point for Sprite Kit and Scene Kit applications, well outside of the scope of what we're going to talk about today. Also outside of the scope of what we're going to talk about today are the different types of watch applications you can build and the TV applications that you can build. But you can also build those with Swift using a lot of the same techniques that we're going to talk about today. But we're going to start, like I said, with single view application. This is just going to give us a little canvas to play with. And I'll call it Hello World because I'm super creative. Because that's basically what we're going to build. I'm going to put a label on screen. We're going to put a button on screen. We're going to have the button change the text of the label, just to see the mechanics of how basic iOS Swift application works. And I'll just create that in my projects folder loosely. I'll delete it later if I remember. If not, it'll sit there forever, and you'll laugh at me, and that's fine. When the project launches, when you first created a project, there's going to be a lot of stuff in the project properties that you really don't have to worry about right now. This stuff becomes important later, super important later as you decide to ship your application. These things will become important. You've got all of the build settings, all of the complicated build settings. Like I said, these aren't things you need to worry about. Things that you might worry about, depending on what type of application you are building, is the capabilities tab. So this is where you can turn things like iCloud on. If you're going to build a CloudKit application, this would be the first thing that you would check. If you have push notifications, you'll want to turn that on. But this is just a whole list of different application capabilities that Apple makes available, and it's really easy to turn these on, turn the switch on, and each one of them gives you a description. So MapKit will tell you that you can create routing apps. So maybe you're creating the next run tracker or something like that, or maybe you want to do transit directions to fill in the gaps that might or might not exist on the iPhone on any given OS level. That's basically where all of these settings live for turning on and toggling all of these different features that you might build into your application. But for now, we don't really need to worry about that. One other thing before we dive in that is kind of interesting is where your app icon and other images can live. So if we wanted to, add a new image, we can do that in this assets collection. and that's going to tell us all the different sizes that we can support, and also, interestingly enough, what size those images should be, so it gives you a little bit of a tip as to what size your app icons should be in this bundle, and it'll automatically pull from this to create the icon. We won't worry about that for now. What we will worry about are these two things here. We've got main.storyboard and we've got viewcontroller.swift. The storyboard is going to be our collection of scenes within the application. So you can think of this as our screen collection, basically. And if I hide this and pull out to here, we can see that this is our view controller. And this actually corresponds to that viewcontroller.swift file that we saw over here. So viewcontroller.swift, and that's the, basically, if you've come from a C# background or .NET background, you can think of this as the code behind. It's kind of parallel, but this is essentially a graphical instance. It's not even, this isn't like a UI file that gets generated from code. Everything that we put into this storyboard file goes into what's called an XIB file. You might hear people call it a nib file if they've been around iOS or Mac programming for a long time. But this is a stored XML version of an object that will get inflated, they call it. They call it deflated and inflated. It's going to get inflated at runtime, so it gets, or hydrated, you might have heard that word. But basically at runtime, this object gets instantiated, and then the view controller .swift file also gets instantiated, and those two work together to be the object that represents this particular screen of our iOS application. So, given that fact, we can add from this library palette over here a whole host of different controls. So we've got things like labels and buttons and segmented controls that have essentially different tabs that you can tap on. There's text fields and sliders and switches. Activity indicator is great for showing feedback for long duration tasks or network access. Progress view for showing progress of something loading. There's a bunch of these things that you can work with. And then recently added are these stack views. So you can stack things horizontally or vertically in your application to kind of keep things neat, especially as things are resizing. So I won't belabor the point too much, but there are a lot of these. We're gonna do a basic hello world where I just drop a label onto the screen and a button onto the screen. And what we want to do is we want to, when we tap this button, we want to change the label to say hello world. It's the simplest thing we can possibly do using UI. And the interesting point here about how Interface Builder works and sort of why I'm showing some of the basics is some people get tripped up on how to create UI and how to wire it up using Interface Builder, because this technology has been around for quite a long time, but it's never been, I don't think it's ever been really adequately explained. And a lot of the books and documentation and sites that are out there for the longest time, because the tool wasn't so great, didn't recommend this practice. So you'll see a lot of how to do this in code, but not traditionally. There wasn't a ton of information about how to do it in Interface Builder. Thankfully, that's changed over time. There's great sites out there like raywenderlich.com. That is fantastic, that goes through some crazy detail about how this stuff works. But what we want to do is click this assistant editor. What the assistant editor is going to do, it's actually pretty smart. We'll hide this guy for now, and we'll click the assistant editor, and I'll even hide this panel for now because we don't really need it for what we're going to do. But what this does is it gives us a side-by-side look, and it's set to what's called automatic mode. Automatic mode is super interesting because it takes a look at what is being displayed in the leftmost pane, and it tries to figure out what the most appropriate thing to show in the second pane would be. This used to be super helpful in Objective-C, because Objective-C required you to have header and implementation files, and with Assistant Editor you could have the header and the implementation file open side by side automatically. As you picked a different file in the project pane, the file on the right would change to smartly to the appropriate thing to show for that given class. This is changeable. You can change this to manual and then pick whatever else you want to be side by side. But I usually leave this at automatic. One other thing that you might want to use here is the assistant editor with preview setup. And what this is going to do is it's going to show you what your application looks like on a device, and you can add different devices to take a look at. You might be noticing something is a little bit wrong with our application right now. If I were to run this right now on an iPhone 4-inch, it would look fine if we were running in landscape, but it would certainly not look fine if we ran it in portrait. What's going on, and something that we'll fix in a moment, is the auto layout, which is another thing that trips a lot of people up. So we'll fix that in a second. What auto layout basically does is gives you the ability to set constraints on where objects go in your user interface. And since we haven't set anything right now, things are not going where I want them to, and we'll fix that in a second. But that's why preview can be helpful, because you can take a look at what your application would look like on a variety of different devices. I can pop in here 5.5 iPhone. It doesn't look as bad, but it's still not centered up the way I expect it to be based on what I was looking at here. But that's only because I haven't told Xcode how I want those objects to lay out. We'll do that after we hook up some code. And how do you do that? Well, for the label, I'm going to need access to the label from this view controller class. And in iOS, you do that with what's called an outlet. And I can create an outlet by holding down the control key and dragging. And that's going to create this blue line that you see. And then I'm going to drag it over to the code inside of the view controller class. And you can see there's a drop point that says insert outlet or outlet collection. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to create an outlet inside of view controller. And I'm going to call this hello label. And you can set what type it is. It's automatically already set to UI label, which is exactly what I want. When I hit connect, it's going to create this property, and it's going to be set to a type of IB outlet. That's just basically a null point, void pointer. It doesn't really, this goes away. But this is just to let Xcode know that this refers to something that's in the XIB file, or in the storyboard file. But that gives me access to hello label as the application is running. For the button, I want to do something different. Now, if I wanted to, at runtime, change, maybe the text. Maybe I want to change the text right now. Let's make it say hello. Let's say I wanted to change the color or maybe hide that button at runtime. Then I would need an outlet. I would want to do the same thing that I did before. I would drag over here. I would create the outlet, and I could do that exact same thing, and that would give me access to the button at runtime. But all I really need to do is run some code when I tap that button. And Xcode gives me a different way to do that, and that's called an action. So I can drag down to where the methods are in my code, and now notice it says insert outlet action or outlet collection. This time I want to change the connection to be an action, and I'll call that action say hello. This type here doesn't really matter. This is going to give me access to what UI element called this action. So I could have multiple different types of objects call this method, this action method at runtime, and the sender, which we'll get in the arguments, the sender will let me know what type of object that was. I'm going to leave it at any object. It doesn't really matter for our case what the sender of the object is, because all we're going to do is change the label of the text box the text of the label to say hello world, right? That's the goal here. So we've done a lot here, or we've talked a lot, but we haven't done a lot. So let's finish this out. So I've got access to this hello label outlet now, and I can set the text, and we'll set it to, like I said, hello world. And that's it. You'll notice Swift does not have semicolons. If you came from Objective-C, it did. If you come from C# or Java, they do. Swift does not. You can use them, but they're optional, so I don't. But this is it. I mean, this is our basic Hello World. All we had to do was drop a couple controls. We created an outlet to the one that we needed to access the properties of at runtime, and we created an action from the button to make something happen. Now, we need to clear up this UI issue. So before we run anything and look like a fool by having labels and buttons that are running off the screen, let's fix that. Let's open our preview back up so that we can see what it's going to look like. And now, like I said, what the problem is here is the way the application is set up to work. Yeah, Phil, the semicolon. It's kind of like that cozy fire that it just makes you feel like I know what I'm doing. I know that this line's done. I'm gonna put a semicolon. Yeah, I can buy that. I can buy that. And that's interesting for you. That's, you know, coming from Ruby as well. Not gonna see a lot of semicolons there either. That's fine. That's fine. I don't love or hate semicolons. I do understand why they got rid of them. But you know, that's more of a, I don't know, that's almost more of a preference case than it is a semantic case anyways. That's cool. Hello, Sasbara. Sasbara, where are you from? Where are you from? That's a good question. For people that are in the chat, where are you from? And are you developers? So what we're doing right now is we're fixing this auto layout issue that we have. And I wanted to explain how this sort of auto layout world works. So you'll notice down here this WNEHNE thing at the bottom of the screen. And that means that any width, any height. Oh, please ask some questions. That is absolutely fine. We are basically going through the basics of iOS programming right now. So I'm keeping it pretty slow as we go through some of the basics. But that's great. Confusion's awesome. That is the starting point of learning. And right now I'm showing how auto layout works. And right now we're trying to fix this issue where on the iPhone 4-inch, I've got this label going off the screen and I've got this button going way off the screen. And that's definitely not what we want. What we actually wanted was this label to be centered. Notice that that blue line is telling me that it is centered in this view. But I want it to be centered on that iPhone. And right now we don't have that. So what I can do is very similar to what I did before when I created that connection to code. I can actually do that control drag within the window. And depending on where I drop this, I'm going to get different options. But if I drag over this way, notice I get this option, center vertically in container. That's not quite what I want. But if I drag this way, it's going to say center horizontally in the container. If I do that, it's going to fix the label in the preview. Notice it jumped way up the screen. That's because I haven't specified. Now that I've specified one constraint, now it wants me to specify all the constraints. It really wants to know, no, really, where do you want this thing positioned on screen? Right now, based on what it knows to center it horizontally, but it knows nothing about vertical, so it's just guessing. I'm going to throw it way up to the top of the phone, or way up to the top of the screen. And that's definitely not what we want. What we want to do is, if we really want this to be right where it's at currently, what we need to do is also control drag up to the top and specify vertical spacing to top layout guide. So this is going to tell me, or tell Xcode that I want whatever it's spaced currently from the top layout guide, which is the top line of the screen. It depends on whether we have a navigation bar or some other element at the top. The top layout guide could not necessarily be the exact top of the screen. But this is going to say, put this on the screen where it's at currently, based on where the top layout guide is. And that's exactly what we want. So now if you notice, we've got things positioned correctly on both of our phones. Both the 4-inch old school iPhone, and then basically the same deal on our, what's essentially a 6 Plus over here. And then we could do the same With this say hello, we could say, give me the distance to the top layout guide. That's not what we want. We do want that center horizontally in container, so we can do that. But what we want to do is keep this label the same distance from this label at all times. So we can actually control drag from the button up to the label. And then that's going to give me some options that have to do with the label itself. So this vertical spacing says, give me the vertical spacing from the button to the label and keep that consistent. So if they moved around the screen for whatever reason, maybe because of rotation or because of some other constraints, their distance between each other would stay the same at all times. And that's exactly what we want. So we've told Xcode that we want the label to be a certain distance from the top of the screen. We've told the button that we want it to be a certain distance from the bottom of the label. And we've told Xcode that we want both the label and the button to be centered within their container. So we've got it satisfied on both sides. Now, it begs the question, what if I did this, moved this way down here? Now we've got all these orange things happening. What does that mean? Well, that means that I have moved the frame. I have moved the object away from where Xcode thinks it should be. And it's telling me where it thinks it should be based on what constraints I've given it, and what the delta is between where it thinks it should be and where I've placed it. And I've got some options, and that leads me to my next point of showing you what the different tools down here are. And this one here looks like something out of Star Wars, and if we click that guy, we get this little pop-up that tells us a bunch of things. This tells me what types of new constraints I can add. And this is set spacing to nearest neighbor. We can do different widths and heights and that sort of thing. This is the pin controller. We actually want to take a look at this guy here. This one is the resolve button. This is one of my favorite buttons for when you run into problems with auto layout. What it can do is it can fix all of the constraints. It can basically update a frame back to where it should have been. It can update the constraints based on where the current frames are. It can reset to the suggested constraints. This one's super powerful. And if you move things around or you change some constraints, this is where you will actually make those changes. If I say update frames, all of the frames will snap back to where Xcode thinks they should have been. If I instead were to move that label and say update constraints for all views, then things are going to change. So now everything's out of sorts, but it's set to where I am telling it to be. And that's one way that I could have done this originally. It said update the constraints based on where the things are placed currently, and it would have guessed at where it should place things. Let's just take a real quick look to make sure things are okay in landscape, and they are. How might they not be? Well, let's first take a look at, make sure the application is working correctly before we start mucking around with it too much. I'm going to run it on an iPhone. Let's see, we need something kind of small because of the screen real estate we're working in. We'll run it on a 4S. Hey, time to live is not great here. Let's get something on screen that's working before we move on. So catching up on chat. So you're from Greece and you want to jump into Android dev, bashing Android and preferring iOS. Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff out there, and I think you need to just ignore it. Honestly, there's a lot of choices to make. There's a lot of different things you can develop for. Some people build databases. Some people build mobile applications. Some people build desktop applications, and they do it in a variety of different languages. And I don't think it's super healthy to bash people based on their preferences and what they think works for them. I think in terms of mobile, you should learn what you have first. it's fun to learn multiple platforms. I just recently got an Android phone, and I'm trying to learn Android development, but I figured I needed to be a user first. So I've been using the phone to see how that works, and then from there we'll dive into the development later. But I don't think you should listen to people that'll bash you for your preferences. Learn what you want to learn. That's how I see it. All right, so our application is running on an iPhone 4S. What happens when we hit say hello? Hopefully it says hello world, and yes it does. As we say in the Twilio world, phones rang. So our hello world works. That's not super exciting, but we've done a few things that are great. So not only have we made this work, but we've specified some auto layout constraints. So we learned that. So not only are we centered and vertically spaced correctly from the top in portrait mode, but we're also doing that in landscape. And how exactly did we do that? Well, we did that with the auto layout constraints. What if we wanted to specify a certain constraint for when this went into landscape? Maybe in landscape mode, instead of things being centered or being so far down the page, maybe we wanted to move them up a little bit. Let's see what that would look like. So this down here is what is called the size class selector. And what we currently have it set to is any width, any height. So no matter what the layout is, these are the basic constraints. And as I move my mouse around inside of this box or series of boxes, you'll see it change. So it says down at the bottom what these correspond to, but compact height, compact width. This is all of your phones up through the iPhone 6 in landscape. So they're going to have a short height and a relatively small width. Compact height, this is any phone in landscape. And regular width, compact height, this is going to be your 6 Plus, so your 5.5 iPhone in landscape. In the opposite direction, compact width, this is your portrait for every phone up to the 6. And down here, this is all phones in portrait. So you have a little bit taller of height on the 6 Plus, so that's why you got to get all the way down to here. Any that's regular width, regular height, regular width. Or no, this is compact, normal, regular. I forget what the difference is from here and here. But this, oh yeah, this basically covers anything. So this is, if you haven't specified any other constraints, no matter what class you're in, this is what it's going to be. Regular width. Now this is any iPad in portrait or landscape. When we start getting down here, this is your iPhones in portrait, iPads in portrait or landscape. That's the regular height. And then regular width, regular height. This is all iPads, basically. So this is the biggest screen real estate possible. So I wanted to look at what would happen for compact height. So this is phones in landscape. So if I set this, you'll notice that we get a change in how this looks on screen. And this is going to correspond to this portrait mode. Now, what I said I wanted to do was in landscape, I want to move these up so that they're tighter up towards the top. And the way that we can do that, we got to bring this panel back in. But the way we can do that is to actually zoom back in here and select this constraint. So I want to change the value of this constraint, but I only want it to change when I'm in what is this, compact height. So what I can do is go over to one of these selectors here. This is the, what is this guy? The attributes inspector. And this is where we can set the different properties on our objects. So if I had, say, the label selected, I could set things like the text, what text is inside of here, what color it is, what type of font it is, and this includes the system settings like titles, which will make it too big for what we have currently selected. Switch that back. But I can set all kinds of different properties on the label control here. I can also set properties on the constraints, and that's exactly what we want to do to move this up a bit when we're in landscape. And the way we do that is there's a little plus. So right now we're 106 from the top layout guide. And I say that in this compact height, which is what we're currently looking at, I actually want it to be 40 from the top. So we'll make it a big difference. So if I just add that constraint setting and change this to 40, it moves up. And notice that the button also moves up. If you remember, we specified that the button should be a certain distance. Let's change this to 20 so it's more dramatic. That the button should stay a certain distance away from the label. Let's tighten that up as well in landscape so that these guys are not only higher up, but they're tighter together when we're in landscape. And I can do that by saying that I only want them to be 10 apart. Notice that now we've got some constraints that are based on the size of the screen, the layout of the device, and that sort of thing, so that when we switch this preview, here we've got a certain space from the top and quite a bit of space here, and when we switch to landscape, they tighten up towards the top. If we rerun the application, we can see that in action. So there's the spacing that we had before, and when we toggle, they get tightened up towards the top. So that is how you can specify some constraints that are based on the screen size and the orientation of the device. What's nice about this, what's nice about the way Apple has chosen to do this, is you'll notice that the names of these things correspond to how much width or height I have at any given time. And if you think about it, for the longest time, the iPhones all had the same resolution. They all had similar screen sizes. And that worked up until the 6 and 6 Plus came out, when we now had 4.7-inch phones and 5.5-inch phones. And no longer can you just say, all phone sizes are pretty much the same and all iPad sizes are pretty much the same. Now we had to introduce something that said, how can we do this moving forward if we're going to have bigger phones, maybe smaller phones, maybe bigger iPads. It came out the iPad Pro, which has a different screen size. Apple needed to have a way to allow you to say how your user interface should be structured without having to pick a specific screen size. Android had been doing something similar to this for a while. It's crazy over there. There's a lot of different options, but it's very similar to the way this works. I think the constraints are pretty unique, the way the iOS programming does that. But in terms of saying, hey, I've got different types of screen sizes, I want to specify how they should be laid out. Android has had that for a little bit. They had to have something a lot earlier on because they had different screen sizes a lot earlier on. There's a graphic that has them all overlaid, and there's 150 different screen sizes and resolution combinations. So it makes it tough. It can make that tough. But we've now got a few different options. So Apple introduced this size class concept, and that's how size classes work. That's cool. Let's get out of Assistant Editor, go back into this single view, and I want to talk about how this scene setup here is constructed. So what we have here is the entrance point to the application. And if we did something crazy, like, say delete this, we lose that. So now we have no view controllers. What's the application going to do? Well, not much. In fact, if we ran it, it would have all sorts of problems. Let's fix that. What we're going to do is, instead of dragging out an object this time, we'll drag out a view controller. And save that. And we'll change the class. We can do that in this inspector. We'll change the class of that to view controller. And try running again. We have a blank screen. Oh, actually, we don't have an entry point. So I'm trying to remember how to do that. That's the exit. I may have worked this. Let's see. How do I set that? Actually, what I wanted to show next anyways was what things will look like if we create a master detail application. So we'll pivot to that anyways. Kind of messed up that. I think you can drag the starting point out from the utilities panel from the library, but instead of worrying about that right now, let's do what I was going to show you anyways, which is what this master detail application template looks like. We'll call this master detail app because we're real creative today, and take a look at what this will look like when we create that. And what the big deal here is going to be is that we no longer just have one view controller, but we've got a bunch. And what's going to happen here is we essentially have a navigation controller. And the reason there's two of these, you might get confused. The reason there's two of these is this can operate differently on the iPhone from the iPad. And yeah, Saucebar, you can follow me as well. I am on there as @BrentSchooley. And I'm on Steam as well. I'm on Steam as BD Schools. What games do you play? I play Rocket League quite a bit on there. Yeah, games are fun. So anyways, this master detail thing that we have going on here, what does this contain? What are we looking at? Well, we have a thing called a table view, and the reason I wanted to show this application setup, the reason I wanted to show this application setup is this is what we're going to be using when we take a look at the IP messaging. Because we're going to have a table view there that shows the messages that are coming in inside of our chat application, and we're going to need to know how that's constructed. What we have here, these prototype cells, every item that is in the list is going to render using a cell, and there's different parts of that, like this title label that we'll have access to when we render that out. And then when we tap on one of these guys, it's going to move to the detail and show some detail content. Let's take a look at what these two different view controllers look like. And this, as we saw before, if we select the view controller itself, we can see what class it corresponds to. So this is the master view controller. So if we go to master view controller, we'll notice that instead of just being a UI view controller this time, this is actually a UI table view controller, and that comes with a bunch of new capabilities, such as, let's take a look down here. Here's the table view methods. So, oh, see ya. Yeah, definitely send me a friend request on Steam. I'll add you. That's great. And if you haven't, follow this so that you can see when I'm streaming again in the future. And that goes for anybody that's in the chat right now. Actually, if anybody else is in the chat right now, where are you from? Are you a developer? Come join us in the chat. Right now, I am working on a few things. We're still going through some of the basics. Pretty soon, we're going to have to pivot over to taking a look at building chat applications with IP messaging. Our pivot point for that is what we're doing right now, which is taking a look at how table views work. And the way table views work is we're going to have a list of objects. And in this case, it's not going to start off with a list of objects already populated. We're going to add them in the UI. So we're going to see how that works. But notice that it's keeping track of a list of objects. And it's going to use those objects to populate a list. And the way it populates the list is we need to take a look at where things get set up in view did load. I think maybe not in this application form template. It's implicit. I think it's set up in the storyboard. If we take a look at the storyboard and if we right click on this table view controller, we can see these outlets have already been set. This is something that you can set in code, or you can set in outlets in Xcode. And what is being set is the data source and the delegate for the table view. Now, the way this works is that the table view delegate has a bunch of methods that that it will call at runtime to populate the table. It'll say, hey, how many rows do I need? How many sections do I need? How do I create a cell for this particular row in this particular section? And the data source is going to provide a lot of that information. And the delegate is going to have a lot of things like, hey, the user just tapped on this cell. What do I do? So what we're basically saying here is that the data source and delegate of this table view are going to live, the code for that is going to live within master view controller. So that's what these methods under this pragma mark that says table view, that's what this is letting us know. It's letting us know that this is the section that corresponds to the table view. So these are methods that are going to get called at runtime by the delegate and by the data source. It's going to say how many sections are in this table view. So if you've ever seen, what's a good application example? Settings is a good application example. Any application that has multiple panels. Maybe we can just fire up the simulator with this application real quick to look at what it looks like, and I'll also show you the settings application for anybody who maybe isn't completely familiar with what I'm about to mention next. If I go to the home screen on the simulator and go to settings, notice how there's a break between this and this next section here, and this next section here, and this next section at the bottom. Those are what we're talking about when we say number of sections in the table view. This one has, by the looks of it, 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. So that's what this is right here. Number of sections in table view, and it's just returning 1. So the one that we're building in this master detail application only has 1 section. The next method that gets overridden is table view number of rows in section. So this is going to get called. It's going to say, hey, for this table view that I'm managing, how many rows are in section 1? In our case, I guess it would be section 0, so the first section. In the settings example, it would do this for each section, each of the 4 sections that it manages. In our case, we're going to want 1 row for each object in objects. So we just return the count. The next one is cell for row at index path. An index path has a section and a row. So this is saying for section 1, for the first section, what do you want the cell to look like for this particular object? Now, as you might know, or you might be able to figure out based on what we've done so far, maybe not. This is gonna correspond to the objects in the array. So this is gonna be object 0, object 1, object 2, object 3, object 4 for this objects array. So basically, this cell for row at index path is going to get called iteratively for each object in the array. And it's going to know to do that because we just told it how many objects there are. So these get called pretty much in order, and they get called periodically. It's going to say, how many sections do I have? We have 1 section. How many objects do I have? Well, we have the number of objects that are in objects.count. Okay, cool. For each object in objects.count, can you, and not even that, for each row in this section, which you've told me there are exactly the same number as there are objects in that array up there, what do you want the cell to look like? So we pull out a cell. This DQ reusable cell with an identifier is a cell recycling thing, so that as things go off screen, they get reused and they'll just get updated here. It's a way, essentially, only the number of cells that are required to fill the screen get created at any given time. And then we're just going to pull the object that corresponds to that row, which is that index, into our objects array. We're just going to pull that object out of our array. It's going to be storing dates, so it's pulling it out as a date. And then it's going to set the text on the cell. Well, we saw this text label when we were looking. Hey, thanks for the follow. Awesome. So we're going to pull out dates, and we're going to set the text label on the cell to that object's description, which in this case, since it's a date, it's going to be that long date string format. And then we return the cell, and the table view displays it. And then they've got a bunch of other ones set here. This is going to allow you to edit cells. So if you return true from can edit row at index path, it's going to allow you to put the table view into edit mode. And they've set this up so that it's possible to delete or to, I believe, rearrange. And we'll see that when we hop back to the application. But this is the basics of how table views work. And that's going to be super important when we take a look at the iOS IP messaging quick start from Twilio, because that's all table view driven as well, because we're going to have a list of messages and we're going to be adding to that list. We're going to be potentially editing things within that list. So we're going to need to understand how table views work. That's why I wanted to go through this and sort of belabor the point. You might be wondering, where's the code for what happens when I tap on an individual element? Well, I skipped over it up here because it's interesting. We have to take a look at two things to see how that might work. These haven't changed much since the early versions of iOS. Talking about the table view. If you're talking about the table view, yes, the table view has not changed almost at all since the beginning. What has changed, what has gotten nicer about this, you'll notice here that it's grabbing a cell with identifier cell, but we haven't said anything about cell anywhere in here. That's all back in the storyboard now. So I can create different prototype cells. I can also create static cells. So I can, if I wanted to create a menu list of items that I could just tap on, I wouldn't even need to do the whole like crazy table view code to make that happen. I could just do static cells here and they would get rendered out. These are prototype cells. And as I was describing before, we get some interesting things out of this. I think I wanted to say that this would have that cell. I think it has that cell identifier. Where is that? Yeah, here it is. So I've got the cell selected. Now this is something you would typically have managed in code in the past. I could create a bunch of different types of cells in here, and I can actually, I didn't show it, but I can change where these things are. I can change where these things are positioned, except they're done. I think they're done with auto layout here. But basically, I could do a cell. Yes, you could have one cell for me and one type of cell for the other people. That's absolutely true. So where that's valuable and what Phil might be getting to with that question is, imagine a chat application where I have an avatar for each user. I might want the avatar of myself to show up on one side of the screen and for other people to show up on the other side of the screen, so that the chat bubbles, you know, if I was doing chat bubbles, they go different directions or that sort of thing. Yeah, absolutely. You can have different types of cells. This one, they just have a simple basic title cell here. And what's kind of interesting about this is this identifier. This is that reuse identifier that we saw. This reuse identifier that we saw accessed in code right here. This DQ cell with identifier cell. This is the bit that allows you to recycle that cell, allows iOS to recycle the cell. This is mainly for performance. But this is what's telling us what type of cell to use here. And when we go back to that storyboard, you'll see where we specified that. If I select just the cell, go to the attributes inspector, I look at the identifier, here it is, cell. So this is letting me know that if I want to refer to this cell in code, it's called cell. If I were to change this to, you know, my cell, and then save that, I'd have to come back over to code and say that I wanted my cell to be called in with this identifier. But yes, that would be how we could specify a bunch of different types of things. You'll notice this guy coming out of the bottom and going over to this other navigation controller that presents this detail view. This little thing that connects them is called a segue. And I didn't show this in the Hello World. I meant to. Maybe we can take a look at that in a second just to see a very simple use case for this. But what this is saying is I'm going to do a show detail, which is a replace, an animated replace. So when I tap on something, you'll notice that it's coming off of this. This is highlighted up here. This is when I tap on a cell. I want a segue called show detail to run. That's going to transition me from the master view controller to the detail controller by way of this navigation controller here. So why did we name this segue? Well, it's pretty clear that they want to present some detail based on what cell that we tap on, because it says detail content goes here. Well, the way that you give information from the master over to the detail is through this segue. And let's take a look at what that looks like. So the segue is up here. And it says the override for this is called prepare for segue. And we check the identifier on the segue. It's similar to the cell identifier, set up the same way in code. We check the segue identifier to see if it's the show detail. And if it is the show detail, you can imagine a storyboard might have a ton of different segues in it. So that's why we're checking. If it is show detail, then we'll take a look at the table view and look at the index path for the selected row. So this is the row and section of what was just tapped. And then we'll set the object corresponding to that row and we'll store that in an object called object. And then we'll set a controller variable. And notice in Swift, these are lets, so these are constants because they're not going to change. We'll let this controller equal the destination, and that's as a navigation controller. And then we're going to grab the top view controller out of that navigation. And so this controller is going to represent our detail view controller. So that's back in the storyboard again. And if I had more screen real estate, I would use the assistant editor so I wouldn't have to keep jumping, but we're gonna have issues if I do that, I think. But basically what we're doing is we're grabbing the detail, which is detail view controller, which is the other side of the segue. And we're setting a property called detail item on that controller. If we go in here, we'll see that there's a detail item property inside of our detail view controller. So that's what we're setting here. So we're setting the detail item property on controller, and then we're setting the top left bar item to a split controller display mode item, and we're saying that it supplements the back button. And then this is also going to be a table view. So let's see what this looks like so that we can understand what the rest of the code is doing. We haven't really taken a look at what they're trying to do with this. Now, Phil said that this hasn't changed much since the beginning. This master detail example also hasn't changed much since the beginning. So if we hit plus, it's just going to add a bunch of rows that correspond to the date stamp, and I can just spam on this for a bit. But that's all it's really doing. And we saw the code. For that in the cell. So cell for row index path is going to be these different dates. So we saw that guy happen. What we didn't see was what happens when we click that button. Why are we getting a bunch of dates? And that's something I didn't show. And I think that's set up all in code. We've got a right button object. Yep, here it is. So on view did load, I haven't mentioned view did load yet. View did load is the function that gets called after your UI loads up for a particular view controller. And what they've done here is they've given us an edit button, which we saw, and they're also doing an add button on the right side of the navigation item. And what they've done with this right button is they've said when it gets tapped, let's call insert new object. And what insert new object is going to do is it is going to insert into the array at the first position a new NS date object. So the new NS date object is going to correspond to the date timestamp currently, and then it's going to set the index. It's going to grab the index path for that first row, and it's going to say insert a row at this first index path and animate it. So that's what we're seeing when we hit new. So it's basically going to just continue to animate new rows in as we tap, and it's pushing the other rows down, which is cool. So that's everything that this master screen is doing, except we haven't done this edit yet. So edit is essentially just giving us delete capability, which is cool. So we can do delete, and that was specified down here in the can edit row at index path. We said true, and then we said what do we do on commit editing style. If it's delete, we remove the object from the array that corresponds to that index path dot row, and then we delete the row from the table view with an animation of fade out. So we can see that in action. If we put this back into edit, confirm the delete, you'll see it fade away and shrink. So that's the basics of this master. Now what happens when we tap on one of these guys? Again, it's just centered up right in the middle. So it's not doing a whole lot. Most of the bulk of this, why I wanted to show this, was in that master. Now, the whole point of showing the table view controller was for you to begin to imagine what that would look like if we populated it with a bunch of chat messages. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. And to do that, we're going to use Twilio's product called IP messaging. Now, IP messaging, it's something that's currently in beta. It's something that we love. This allows you to quickly build chat applications into your mobile and web applications. And we have an SDK for JavaScript, and we have iOS and Android SDKs for this as well. And what's really cool is if you go to twilio.com/docs, we have documentation for IP messaging that includes a really cool quick start. It's going to tell you all the information you need to know about what credentials are required for you to work. We have a very, very quick and easy to spin up server that's going to be required for you to grab access tokens. Basically, this is the guy at the door that hands you a pass, or this is you out handing your friends a pass so that you can get in the door to the social club that is our chat application. And we have a quick start server application for PHP that'll allow us to do this really quickly. I already have it on my machine, so I'm just going to run a copy that I already have. And then what that's going to allow us to do is see this chat application working in the web browser before we start working with it in iOS. So I am going to hop over to my terminal. I already have it running, so this is the IP messaging quick start. I've got it running on localhost port 8000. Now, if you could all open up your web browsers and go to localhost port 8000 on my machine. Oh wait, you can't. So since you can't do that, I need to find a way to work around that. And the way I'm going to work around that is using a tool that a lot of my team knows and loves, which is ngrok. And ngrok is going to allow me to create a tunnel out to the public internet through to my local host on port 8000. And I am going to put that on a subdomain that I will call Brent. When I run this, you'll see the status on my screen says that I have now created an ngrok tunnel. So the URLs http brent.ngrok.io and https brent.ngrok.io will now tunnel back to my local system on port 8000. And if I run brent.ngrok.io, you'll see a chat application pop up. I invite all of you that are watching right now to go to brent.ngrok.io and start typing in this chat so we can get some messages on the screen. So I'll say hi. I am Tawdry Roddy Hanover. Hi, I'm Tawdry. Let's see. We'll wait and get a few more people in. Oh, we've got Feisty Victoria Jamestown has joined the chat. Again, anybody is welcome to join into this chat at brent.ngrok.io. This is running using Twilio IP messaging. And I would take a look at that server code right now, but I am going to run firmly out of time if I do that, but I suggest that if that's interesting to you, which it probably is, that you check out this basically this identity guide that is linked from the quick start, and perhaps Phil can link that into the chat, or actually I can probably link that into the chat, but I'll let Phil do it. That's at Docs API IP Messaging Guides Identity, which walks you through basically how that token access works. But we've got a bunch of different options for backends, and we've got a bunch of different options for front ends. Looks like we've got Killer Ulysses Rally, and we've got Unique Lando Yale. So we've got a bunch of different uniques watching this right now, and that's cool. I'm going to code some iOS stuff now. So we'll go back over to iOS, and how we're going to do that to save a bit on time. I was going to build this completely from scratch, but for today, for the sake of time, we are simply not going to be able to do that. What we are going to do is we're going to start from this Swift Quick Start, and you can just download that. It'll go into my downloads folder, and what we're going to want to do now, if you'll notice, if you're savvy, you'll notice that there is a pod file in here. We've got a pod file in this application folder structure, and if you've done any iOS development in the past, that might tip you off that our project is using CocoaPods. CocoaPods is a dependency manager for Objective-C applications, and it also works for Swift. There's also a thing called Swift Package Manager. It's still in its infancy. Most people are still using CocoaPods, but CocoaPods is going to allow you to download a bunch of different frameworks and libraries that people in the community have created. There's a trending cocoapods.github.io. That's a good one to link, Phil. Trending CocoaPods gives you a list of all of the watcher counts, highest watcher counts for different CocoaPods across the board, and these will get you up and running pretty quickly with a bunch of different things. There's things like data flow. There's a confetti view. What's this confetti view? So this is fun. I find out these new things that people are doing that are crazy. Apparently, someone decided they wanted to have a view that added confetti to their application. How simple is this thing to use? Well, we just specify pod sa confetti view, then run pod install, and add a sa confetti view to our application. And there's even different types of confetti. The world is an amazing place. You can even create smiley face confetti in your application. That's great. It's not super practical for what we're doing right now. So what I would like to do instead is use our CocoaPod for IP messaging, which is great because it's actually already sort of set up for us already. As we were looking at in Finder, we have a pod file. Now, when you have a pod file, the first thing that you want to do is head to your terminal, and we're going to need to go into this folder, and you'll notice there's that pod file. And what we want to do with that pod file is run a command called pod install. So we do pod install. He wants confetti IP messaging. We might be able to do confetti IP messaging. Let's see if we can get there. So what pod install is going to do, and we'll take a look at the pod file in a moment. It's going to go and look for all of our dependencies. And if I open up our quick start workspace inside of Xcode. Now a workspace, the reason we're using a workspace now instead of just a basic project is because a workspace combines multiple projects into the same application. And what we're going to do here is work inside of the IPM quick start, and we can drill into the IPM quick start folder, and we'll see files that we were familiar with, like storyboards and Swift files. This pods project here has our pod file, and that's our first opportunity to kind of look at what a pod file looks like. So we have the source for where it should check for CocoaPod specs, and then we have a couple of pod specifications. This is saying that we want to bring in Twilio's IP messaging client, and it's also saying that we want to bring in Twilio Common, which is another one of our pods. And it's actually going to pull the pod spec for how to pull those in off of servers that we control. Now, we saw before that normally you just specify a pod. And what was this one? This is pod SA confetti view. So we can bring in our pod SA confetti view here as well. For consistency's sake, we're using single quotes everywhere else, so we'll do that. And if we add that, we can come back over here and we can say pod install again. And this is going to go out and it's going to grab SA confetti view and bring that into our project. It looks like this is a pod written in Swift, so we need to also say that we want to use frameworks before we do that, as this is saying, and run that again. Basically, this is the bridging mechanism between Swift and Objective-C in action, and CocoaPods, for it to be able to do its work correctly, needs to know that it needs to create a framework for that module to live correctly. And so now we have access to a few new things. We have brought in Twilio IP messaging and SA confetti view. One quick build of our application will resolve anything that Xcode doesn't think it knows about, even though it actually knows about it. And that's cool. So we now have a bunch of different things that we can work with. And we've got a view controller. And where I'm feeling a little bit confident that we can have confetti IP messaging is this is just a basic UI view controller. So we might be able to swap that out for SA confetti view here in a moment. I need to see exactly how they're doing this, though. I guess it's a view, so we could overlay it on top of our view controller. So we'll give it a try. We'll give it a try at the end. Since we don't have anything crazy going on here, we might be able to toggle confetti mode or something like that. All right, let's walk through what this code is going to be doing and actually get our chat on screen. And it's going to do this using the Twilio IP messaging client. So we're gonna spin up an IP messaging client. We're gonna need we're gonna be putting our users into the general channel. We're gonna need an identity. So this is going to be our name. You've seen that I'm Tawdry something. That's going to be generated by the token server, the authentication server, when we ask for it. And then we're going to need to store a list of an array of messages. Now, you might notice this looks pretty familiar to that table view code that we were looking at before that had an array of objects. Same concept here. We're going to do the exact same thing with this array that we did with the other array. There's a few outlets here that are coming out of the storyboard, which we should probably take a look at before we go too much further. The storyboard, you'll notice we have a navigation controller, which gives us the bar at the top. Then we have a few things. So we've got an info panel at the top, which is just the navigation item. So we've got a prompt that says logging in, and then we've got a title that says general, and then we've got our familiar table view that we've seen before. And the cell here is going to have a title and a subtitle. One is going to be used for the body text of the message, and the bottom subtitle is going to be used for the username. And then we've got a text box at the bottom that's going to allow us to type in our message to add to the view. And real quickly, so I can get this on screen before we look at too much more of the code, is I need to change a few things. I need to change that to HTTPS because the iPhone will complain if I don't. And I need to change this to brent.ngrok.io. And those two changes, when you load up this quick start, those two changes are the only things you need to do. You need to give it the correct URL to your token server, and you need basically, that's it. You need to get the server up and running and change the token server. And then if I run that, let's run it on an iPhone 5. And if I run that, no confetti yet, but let's see if the chat loads. And then we'll take a look at how the chat loads. Give me a simulator. You get a simulator, and you get a simulator. We're zoomed in quite a bit. Let's peel that back a little bit. We're only on 1280 by 720, so we can't look at an iPhone 5 in its full glory. It's loading, it's running, it's pulling in a bunch of chat messages, I believe. If we take a look at our app, are we still working over here? Hey, okay. So what we didn't do, and something that we can add later, is we didn't load the chat history. So this is assuming that you just started your application development and you just started this for the first time, so you don't have chat channel history to load, and that's fine. We can actually pull that in fairly easily later. So I'm going to say hi from the iOS application, and you'll see that it shows up in your web browser if you're still paying attention, if you still have it loaded. If you don't still have it loaded, you'll see it on screen here. But we do have chat messages going from iOS to the web. So yeah, help, I'm trapped in an iPhone simulator. Yeah, so this is great. I mean, it really takes no time at all. In fact, it's so quick and easy to use that you can get up and running with IP messaging in apparently in like 3 minutes. So the way you would do that is you would watch this YouTube video that another person on our team, Suraj, put together, where he really quickly walks through how these things are built. But you saw here too, from the quick start, you can go from 0 to chat application in no time flat. I think Phil really wants confetti, so let's try that. Let's take a look at SA confetti view again and see what we need to do. This looks like it's going to be pretty easy. We'll do this in view did load again. So we know that view did load is where we do all of our things on startup. We'll do this before we go back and do the responsible thing and see how IP messaging works, just because he really wants the confetti. And then we will add this. Why are you complaining? Oh no. Unresolved identifier. Oh, you know what? We need to import SA confetti view. So that's interesting. When you bring in a library that's in Swift, you do need to import the module. Ours doesn't require an import because it's structured a little bit differently. Now, how do we specify confetti type? Phil, which type of confetti did you want? You want regular confetti, star confetti, triangle confetti? This is all for Phil. We could do a poll, but we don't have a lot of people in the chat. That would be a fun thing to do in a poll if we had more people in the chat. But I'll wait for Phil's confetti type before we move on with that. We'll go back and look at what the code's doing while we wait to see. Phil wants star confetti. So what was that? Confetti view dot type, and that is in view did load. Confetti view dot type. Now, what's interesting with enums, and I didn't get a chance to talk about this, is I could type this as, what is it? Confetti. I think it's confetti type. Maybe. I don't know. I don't even know what that. Nope, that enum's not correct. What is it? Dot type. Confetti view dot type equals dot star. I don't think this is working. Oh, wait, yeah, it is. Okay, so what is this type? Case star. What is this? Oh, it's confetti type. So SA confetti view dot confetti type. So I could specify this as confetti type dot star. Actually, that doesn't look like it's the right object. But anyways, so we have to call it dot star because I think they've got something weirdly configured with that enum. But whatever. So hopefully that's going to give us some confetti when we run this in a second. But first, I want to show you how this code is working. So what we set up above at the top were a bunch of things that have to do with IP messaging, but we didn't do anything with them yet. So we need to request a token from our token server that's running at brent.ngrok.io/token. We're going to give it a device ID, and it is going to generate an identity to go with that. We've noticed we get these random names like Killer Quincy Tulsa, So Killer Quincy Tulsa is the random name that I got the last time we ran this, and that was given back to us when we requested the token. What we did pass in is the device ID. So this is the UUID string that represents the simulator in this case, or your iPhone if it was running on your iPhone. And what we're going to do is we're going to fire up an NSURL session and request a URL, which is this brent.ngrok.io/token.php. We're going to use that URL to make a request using get to the PHP server. And when data comes back from that request, as long as it's not empty, we can parse it out as JSON. So we'll parse the data into a JSON variable. We'll grab the token out of it. So the token is our pass to get into the chat. And that comes back from the PHP server. And we'll grab our identity out of that since we didn't know what it was going to be. If we were managing our authentication, which is a blog post that I'm working on currently, we could have a login and sign up flow. When you log in, we would know your identity, we would know your username, and the server could verify that you really are who you say you are and give you a token. So say I wanted to have a token that had an identity of Brent Schooley in it. I could log in as Brent Schooley. I could say, hey server, give me a check, and then we'll go on from there. Could that be done with a maybe? Well, what it could be done with, instead of this, it could be done in Swift with, say, if let some data equals data, and then put it in this block. That could be done. They could have done this there instead, and that would probably be more idiomatic Swift, because what this does is it does conditional binding. So it says try to set, because this is an optional, and we can see that if we option click, if you option click on any variable, it'll give you a little popover that tells you some more details about it. And this one has a question mark at the end of it, which tells me, it basically tells me that this could be nil. It could be because it's got a question mark. That's called an optional. And this if let some data equals data says try to set some data using this data that was passed in. And if you can, run the code that's in this block. So if I get to here, some data will have data and I can do stuff with it. So we could replace this if data not equal to nil with if let something other than the name data, probably, so that's not super confusing. If let some data equal data, and then this block would fall in there as well. That would be more idiomatic Swift. You are correct by pointing out that the not equal to nil bit assignment within a conditional isn't cool. Yeah. Well, it's not. So it's not assignment. It's actually not assignment within a conditional. This if let is a different thing from if. This is basically, well, I mean, it is an if statement, but it's, yeah, I mean, I guess it's assignment within a conditional. It's not your normal arbitrary, assignment though. Yeah, I don't know. It's basically, it's a better way of doing nil checking, and it removes a lot of nesting. So anyways, that's something we could discuss semantics of later. But yeah, that would be a more idiomatic Swift way to do this. Anyways, moving on. Easy to get derailed on these things, but certainly not a problem. I do think that would be a more idiomatic, what I just put in there would be a more idiomatic way to do this for Swift. Maybe I'll make a pull request. So anyways, we've got our identity back. Since we didn't specify who we were. And I was saying you could specify who you were. We could totally do that. We would have to change the server. But the server gives us back a random identity, so we need to store that so we know who we are. Phil, it's fine. You can derail whenever you want. And then we're going to want to set up the IPM client. So we're going to create the Twilio IP messaging client. We're going to pass it the token. And we're going to set the delegate on ourself. And the delegate methods we'll see down at the bottom are all of the methods that are going to get called on the client by Twilio when things happen. Things like messages getting added, channel history loading, members joining and leaving the channel, that sort of stuff. We'll see that as we move through the code. Then we're going to join the general channel. This is all when the view is loading up. We're going to join the general channel. And the way we're going to do that, because of the way IP messaging is set up, is we're going to grab the channel list. Since we want to join general, we're going to grab the channel list. And then if that's successful, then we're going to look for a channel with the unique name of general, which this is default channel, which we set above to general. We're going to look for a channel called general, and if it already exists, we'll just join it. So we'll set general channel equal to channel, and we'll join it. And then we'll print out that we joined. Otherwise, we need to create the general channel because nobody's created it yet. So this is the first time that we've come in here. We need to create it. So we'll create the channel, general chat channel of type public, and then we'll set its unique name to general, and we'll join it. We'll join it, and then we'll set the unique name. But anyways, all we're doing up there is joining general. So that's in response to making this request, getting back a token. We'll grab the channel list, and we join the general channel. And then once that happens, we update and say we're logged in, and we logged in as whatever identity we got back. So that's going to get put into that prompt that's at the top of the screen. And then this .resume says, hey, run all of that task stuff that's up there. So that's going to make the HTTP request and set up all of those things. These here are just notifications to let us know that the keyboard is appearing. In this particular setup, you need that setup because you need that setup because you need to dodge the keyboard and reflow the UI. I wrote an application and a blog post that I'll link that gets around this by using something called Slack Text View Controller. That has all of the keyboard dodging and resizing and panning and a bunch of other features built into it. But since we're using a default view controller here, we need to do a lot of that ourselves. It's not super important for understanding how chat works. That's just basic UI stuff in iOS. And then we set the table row height, and the estimated row height is 66 for how the cell is going to lay out. That just gives iOS a little bit of an indication of how much space it should leave. It's actually going to size it automatically anyways. And then we added confetti view. We don't know if that works yet, but we added it. We'll see if it works when we get there. I'm not going to dig too much into the keyboard stuff, but this is using the bottom constraint to resize the view as the keyboard animates in. When the keyboard shows, we're scrolling down to the bottom message. And then when the keyboard hides, we reset the bottom constraint. So this basically keeps the message list above the text view as it's moving. Because you can imagine we've got that text control at the bottom of the screen, which I can show. We have this text control at the bottom of the screen, and when we tap on it, it's going to move up, which is because the keyboard is going to come up. And we want to shrink the message list above. I actually have the hardware keyboard turned on, so if I toggle software keyboard, the hardware keyboard messed me up. There we go. So you can see that as the text moves up, we shrink the list and it scrolls. If I were to perhaps, if I had more messages, we could scroll that out and you would see that it would scroll back down to the bottom. But you can kind of see it happen because it moves it up as it hits. So that's all happening because of this keyboard did show scroll to bottom, and when it hides, it's just resetting everything back to where it was. So that's the keyboard dodging stuff. View tapped, that was when I had the keyboard showing and I tapped inside of the view, the keyboard dismissed itself. That's done using text field resign first responder. Scroll to bottom just says find the very last message and scroll there. And here's where things get interesting. Here's the meat, as they say. So this is the message added, client channel message added off of IP messaging client. So this says, for this channel, a message was added, and it gives you the channel. So you could imagine that this was sitting in some service layer that was managing a bunch of different channels. So since we only have one channel, this is always going to be our general channel, and then it's going to be a new message. What we're going to do with that message is chuck it into that array that we had at the top, that messages array that we're going to use to keep track of the messages in the application. And then we're going to reload the data in the table view. So we're going to be looking for those table view methods that we saw in the master detail example. And then this dispatch async get main queue, if you are in, like we are here, kind of in a background thread, if you want to do things on the UI, you need to call it from the main UI thread. And this is basically saying if we have more than 0 messages, we need to scroll to the bottom. That's a preference. You don't necessarily need to do that. I could see applications where when a new message pops up, you wouldn't want to scroll to the bottom, because then the person will lose their place in the application, and that might not be what you want. But that's what we're doing here, scrolling down to the bottom when a new message comes in. Here's the text field delegate. So this is for when text is ready to be sent from the text. So that's when I either hit send at the bottom or hit enter. If I'm using a hardware keyboard, what should we do? Basically, we're going to create a message with a general channel, create a message using the text from the text field, and we're going to send that message out. And then we will blank out, when that's done, we will blank out the text that's in the text field and resign first responder, which will remove the keyboard. And then here's our table view. So we were definitely looking forward to seeing those table view methods. You should be familiar with this by now. They're not setting, I don't think, oh wait, here it is. So table data view source, this is returning one section. So same as the last one, we only have one section. How many rows do we have? The number of messages that we have, just like the number of objects we had in the last one. And then we dequeue a cell with an identifier like we did before. This one's called message cell. If we take a look at main storyboard and we click on the cell, you'll notice it is message cell. So that's the one we want. We know it has a title and a subtitle. So we can set those here. And the way these work, the way these are set up is, one is the text label, that's the big one, and then the detail text label is the smaller one, the subtitle. And so we're gonna grab that cell. We're gonna grab a message out of the array that corresponds to the row that we're currently looking at, and then we're gonna set the subtitle to the message's author, and we're gonna set the main body text label to the message's body. And we're going to set selection style to none, because we don't actually want to be able to tap on it. It doesn't really make sense to tap on it. And that's everything. That's how this fairly simple chat application works. I say fairly simple, but we know that it's about to get more complicated, right? Because we have confetti, hopefully. Well, I really want to see chat with confetti. I don't know if it's going to work, Phil. I have something set wrong. Boo, no confetti. Phil's gonna cry if I don't get this working. What did we do? How did we set this up? Where did I set this up? View did load, right? View did load. Yeah, we were about to get star confetti and then it didn't work. Data task with request. Keyboard stuff. Self.view.add subview. That really should have done it. I'm gonna try moving this code. Here? No, I don't think that should matter. Self.view.bounds. I wonder if I need to take a look. Maybe there's an overlay view. How are we doing? How is this structured? We can see the hierarchy if we do this. Self.view really should. Oh, that start confetti. Did I miss something? Yeah, I bet I did, huh? Oh, here it is down here. Start confetti. Oh, well, that's good. They don't imagine that you could possibly want confetti on at all times. This developer has it together. I now understand why it's so high on the trending CocoaPods list. This guy has got his stuff together. Okay, so we'll come down here. We'll add that back in. And I wonder if it might be instructive. Might be instructive to not always have confetti running. Let's try this. Start confetti. Oops, I can spell really. Let's add a start confetti button. This is where the stream gets ridiculous. I am running out of time too, so let's get this working so that we can have confetti. And it's cool though, because this is still doing 5 seconds of confetti when a new message appears. Yeah, let's do that after we verify that confetti works. Let's just add this to the bottom. I need... No. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Start, let's call this confetti toggle. Why? Why you hate? What did? Oh, I put it inside of another method. I'm real good today. We actually need to put that inside of... Actually, let's just verify it in view did load for now. We'll come back to that start, but we'll come back to that button in a minute. I need to get rid of this. Where is my confetti? Okay. Confetti view dot start confetti. There we go. Now to the ridiculous portion. Hey. Confetti chat. There's only one problem. There's only one problem I see with confetti view currently, is that I can't actually tap on the text view because it's overlaying it. So I would actually need to work with that bottom constraint to get rid of it. But that's fun. We've now seen if you send messages from the chat, they'll still show up though. So you can do hey confetti chat. Yeah, so that's cool. So yeah, so next steps for that, I suppose, would be 5 seconds worth of confetti on a new message arriving. So that might be something that we can play with as a next step on a future stream. Like I said, I've got an inspector showing up today to take a look at the apartment because they are building a grocery store underneath our apartment, and I believe they need to take a look around at the structural integrity inside of what is the floor right above it. So that's about all I'm going to be able to do today. This is what I was working on. This is where you can find me if you want to check out things that are going on GitHub. I mentioned also this blog post that I put together that shows how to use the Slack text view controller to make the UI a little better on this, and also add a bunch of features. And I have another blog post that's coming out this week that will be showing how to add some more features. So I leave off at using Slack text view controller to get everything loaded. I show you how to do loading the channel history, which we didn't get to in this stream, but it shows you how to load the channel history. But then it leaves off there, and it continues in this next blog post by showing you how to do auto completion of usernames. I'm going to show you how to edit messages, delete messages, as well as what is the other feature that I added? I've got editing. I've got autocomplete. Oh, and I've got when we load the channel history, it can take a while if there's a lot of messages stored. So instead of leaving the user looking at a blank screen for a while those messages come in, I'm going to show a loading HUD. So a little bit of an overlay that says loading messages, and then it'll pop in there. So that is going to be the stream for today. I really appreciate everyone hanging out this morning. We'll do this again really soon. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get on this weekend, but bare minimum, I will be back next Wednesday at the exact same time. Matt Mackay is going to be streaming later today at 11 Pacific, maybe 11:30 Pacific, but he is going to be doing some iOS as well. So if you tuned in late and you were really missing out on the earlier stuff where I showed you basic iOS stuff, Matt is going to be doing something similar this afternoon, and I highly recommend you check him out, follow him. If you enjoyed this, follow me so that you know when I'm going to be on next. But if I don't see you before then, we'll see you next week on Wednesday. Thank you for hanging out.